Alright, Pretender here, and today I'm here with the full build guide for Jiaoqiu. This video is pretty much going to be taking you over some things you should know first, his kit, Eidolons, best Lightcones, best relics, and stat you want on the relics, alongside some team ideas. I will be noting on each side if this is going to be better for a debuffer or a DPS, because there are two ways to play them. One is going to be better than the other in certain situations, and I will be sure to list that just so you do know. So please make sure you do pay attention to what I'm saying, because you might think or just see something and you might try to go for a DPS when it's not viable, and you might decrease your performance from that. So once again, please make sure you pay attention. Before I get to the video, drop a like, drop a sub, hit the bell icon for more videos like this, and let's get straight into it. So before actually going into his kit, there are some things I want to talk about. The way you play Jiaoqiu is pretty much dupe dependent. For the most part at E0, his damage is very low. While you can still play him as a dot and somewhat of a damage dealer, it is not going to be that good. The time where he is enabled as a DPS is off his second Eidolon, which increases his multiplier for his dot by a lot, and that makes him viable as a more damage side dot character. So if you do have him below E2, it is very much recommended to not build him as a DPS and just build him as his role as a debuffer, because that is his core role. But this video will cover options for more on the DPS slash debuffer or just pure debuffer role, because he will be doing damage even if you build him debuffer, but it's not going to be high. So if you do not have him E2, I would not recommend building him on the DPS options. I would only recommend doing the optimal debuffer options, because you'll see a lot better out of his kit. But now talking about his kit, Jiaoqiu is a fire character following the path of nihility. His basic attack deals fire damage equal to 100% of Jiaoqiu's attack to a single target enemy. His skill deals fire damage equal to 150% of Jiaoqiu's attack to a single target enemy, and fire damage equal to 90% of Jiaoqiu's attack to adjacent targets, with a 100% base chance to inflict one stack of Ash and Roast on the primary target. His ultimate sets the number of Ash and Roast stacks on the enemy target to the highest number of Ash and Roast stacks present on the battlefield, then activates a zone that deals fire damage equal to 100% of Jiaoqiu's attack to all enemies. While inside the zone, enemy targets receive 15% increased ultimate damage with a 60% base chance of being inflicted with one stack of Ash and Roast when taking action. While the zone exists, this effect can trigger up to 6 times, and for each enemy target, it can only trigger once per turn. This trigger count resets every time Jiaoqiu uses an ultimate. The zone lasts for 3 turns, and its duration decreases by 1 at the start of this unit's every turn. If Jiaoqiu gets knocked down, the zone will also be dispelled. His talent: when Jiaoqiu hits an enemy with a basic attack, skill, or ultimate, there is a 100% base chance to inflict one stack of Ash and Roast on them. At one stack, increases the damage they receive by 15%, then each subsequent stack increases this by 5%. Ash and Roast is capped at 5 stacks and lasts for 2 turns. When an enemy target is inflicted with Ash and Roast, they are considered as being burned at the same time, taking fire dot equal to 180% of Jiaoqiu's attack at the start of each turn. For his technique, after using the technique, creates a special dimension that lasts for 15 seconds. After entering combat with enemies in the special dimension, deals fire damage equal to 100% of Jiaoqiu's attack to all enemies, with a 100% base chance of applying one stack of Ash and Roast. Only one dimension created by allies can exist at the same time. For his bonus traces, his A2, when the battle starts, immediately regenerates 15 energy. His A4, for every 15% of Jiaoqiu's effect hit rate that exceeds 80%, additionally increases attack by 60% up to 240%. And his A6, while the zone exists, enemies entering combat will be afflicted with Ash and Roast. The number of stacks applied will match the highest number of Ash and Roast stacks possessed by any unit while the zone is active, with a minimum of 1 stack. For his Eidolons, his first Eidolon, allies deal 40% increased damage to enemies afflicted with Ash and Roast. Whenever inflicting Ash and Roast on an enemy target via triggering the talent's effect, additionally increases the number of Ash and Roast stacks applied, this time by 1. His E2, when an enemy target is afflicted with Ash and Roast, increases the multiplier for the fire dot dealt by Ash and Roast to this target by 300%. His E4, when the zone exists, reduces the enemy target's attack by 15%. And his E6, when an enemy target gets defeated, their accumulated Ash and Roast stacks will transfer to the enemy with the lowest number of Ash and Roast stacks on the battlefield. The maximum stack limit of Ash and Roast increases to 9, and each stack of Ash and Roast reduces the target's all-type res by 30%. For his best Lightcones, his best one is going to be his signature Lightcone, giving you a 60% increase to effect hit rate, which is going to help a lot with the attack percent that you can gain through effect hit rate, because you're going to want a lot of effect hit rate on Jiaoqiu. And anytime you do use a basic attack, skill, or ultimate, you have a 60% chance to inflict unarmored on a target. Unarmored enemies receive 10% increased damage for 2 turns, and if the target is under a dot state that's inflicted by the wearer, you have a 60% base chance to upgrade Unarmored to the Cornered state, which additionally increases the damage enemies take by 14% for 2 turns, and during the period you can't inflict Unarmored again to the target. So everything the Lightcone is doing, it's giving him a 60% effect hit rate, which is going to be very beneficial to his own base kit. And on top of that, you're getting increased vulnerability on the enemies, so your main DPSs could do more damage. So overall, this is the best Lightcone you can use. Another great option for a debuff for Jiaoqiu is Silverwolf Signature Lightcone, giving you a 24% increase to effect hit rate. And when the wearer deals damage to someone that has 3 or more debuffs, you get a 12% increase to crit rate. You can ignore that part, it doesn't really matter. And when using basic attack, skill, or ultimate, you have a 100% base chance to inflict 8th letter code on a random hit target that doesn't have it, and 8th letter code targets will receive 12% increased damage. So this Lightcone is pretty much a downgraded version of his own signature Lightcone because it does give you 24% effect hit rate, but that is a lot lower than the 60% you get. You are able to make enemies take increased damage, but obviously his own has a better version of that. But it is still a fantastic option you can use if you do have it, so this is another good option. And now every other option I'm going to talk about is a 4-star or free, so I'm going to display them at S5. A Lightcone that works good for both DPS and debuffer, which is pretty much just a stat stick at the end of the day, is the Eyes of the Prey, providing you a 40% effect hit rate increase and increasing dot by 48%. So you are getting a dot damage increase, but that doesn't really matter unless you do have E2. It's mainly for the 40% effect hit rate you do get. And once again, effect hit rate is very important for his base kit, so this is a great option. Another great option for the debuffer Jiaoqiu is Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat, which when you do hit an enemy target that isn't ensnared, you have a 100% base chance to ensnare the hit enemy, and ensnared enemies have their defense reduced by 16% for 1 turn. So this is providing you an additional debuff that can also be defense shred, so letting your DPSs do even more damage to the enemy, because you have the debuffs provided by his base kit, with them taking increased ultimate damage and just vulnerability in general, and now on top of that you do have a defense shred. And now this next option is only really good for his DPS part, so I only recommend this if you really do have none of the other options, or you do have him at E2, and that is Good Night and Sleep Well. For every debuff the enemy target has, you get a 24% increase to damage dealt, stacking up to 3 times, and also applies the dot. So this is just a big increase to his personal damage. Once again, at E0, it's really not worth doing this unless you really do have none of the other options. And if you have him at E2, assuming you're wanting to do more damage with him with the dot, then it becomes pretty viable. And then the last option, this one is more on the DPS side, but is also optimal in pure fiction mode, regardless of E0 or E2. And that is the Herder Shop Solitary Healing, giving you a 40% increase to break effect, and using it ultimate increases dot dealt by the wearer by 48% for 2 turns, which is going to be good for people with E2, but at E0 it's not going to be that big of a difference. And when an enemy target suffering from dot imposed by the wearer is defeated, you regenerate 6 energy for the wearer, which is going to be really good in pure fiction, and that makes this optimal in pure fiction just because you can keep having your ultimate cycled, because there's so many enemies that are going to be killed that are going to be inflicted with the dot from Ash and Roast, so you're constantly able to refresh the 6 stack cap that the ultimate has. So that's why this Lightcone is more on the DPS side if you have no other option, but you have E2, or just in pure fiction in general. And now for Jiaoqiu's best relic set for his main role being a debuffer. Even as a DPS, this doesn't change too much, you just sort of tweak it. But for the debuffer, the best thing you can do is combine 2 pieces of Hackerspace for the 6% speed it provides, and then it's practically anything you want that might benefit him in some way. You could do 2 pieces of one of the attack percent increasing sets, so the dot set, Musketeers, or the Windsword set that gives you 12% attack. You could do 2 pieces of the debuff set, which just increases some damage dealt by debuffs, and just combining 2 pieces and 2 pieces of those will be good. It's mainly because Hackerspace 2-piece speed is going to be very helpful. And if you do have his E2, you could take the 4-piece of the dot set on a dot team. It's going to make his performance very well, because once again his dot's going to do really good damage at E2, so that becomes the optimal thing for E2. You could also do 2 pieces of one of the ones mentioned and 2 pieces of the fire set for fire damage increase, since he does deal fire damage. And if you want to be hyper optimal, you could take 4 pieces of the eagle set. The 2-piece is useless, but the 4-piece, when you do use your ultimate, you get a 25% action forward. So this is going to help you spam a lot to get your ultimate and keep the ultimate up. For the best ornaments on his more debuffer side / support, the best one depending on what team you are. So if you are taking this guy on a Acheron team, the best one overall is going to be Von Walk, providing an energy regeneration rate increased by 5%, and when you do have 120 speed or higher, you get a 40% action forward immediately upon entering the battle. So this will help you with energy, and on top of that, it lets you set up very very easily on an Acheron team, especially because with a rope that is energy, you just need to use a skill and you're going first in the battle. So you just skill and now you have your ultimate up and you're easily getting to go. So this is optimal on an Acheron team. It could be optimal in other places if you do want him to go first, which for the most part you will. But if you don't want to do that, you could do the support set of Ageless, giving some survivability with 12% max HP, and when you have 120 speed or higher, you get an 8% attack increase to all your allies. So this is just a nice attack increase for your allies and himself. You could also do Broken Keel, which gives you 10% effect res, and when you have 30% or higher effect res, you give everyone 10% crit damage. So if you are running him on a team where the main DPS does want to crit, it's going to be helpful, and then also having 30% or higher effect res is going to help you get CC less, so it is a viable option, and one that's good for mainly the DPS side, but can also work on the debuffer side because it does provide some stuff, is the Pen Cosmic set, giving you 10% effect hit rate increase, and you get an attack increase that is equal to 25% of the current effect hit rate up to a maximum of 25%. So this gives you an extra bit of effect hit rate that you're going to want to build them by anyways, so it can help with hitting the requirements, and on top of that you're awarded for building him with more effect hit rate, giving you up to 25% attack. And this last option is only good for the DPS side if you want him E2, and that is Glamoth, giving you 12% attack, and when you have 135 speed, you deal 12% more damage, and if you have 160 speed, you deal 18% more damage. Once again, this is for his DPS side because it only benefits himself, so for the most part, this is only recommended for E2. For the main stats on his relics, for the body, you do want to get effect hit rate. For the feet, you want speed. For the orb, you want fire damage. And for the link rope, you want energy regeneration rate. For the most part, these aren't interchangeable because speed boots on Jiaoqiu is mainly the best. Fire orb instead of attack percent is good because for the most part, a proper build Jiaoqiu with more attack percent coming from something like the orb is going to be diluted. So you definitely want to go fire damage. And the reason you want energy regeneration rate rope is because you want to have active ult for the most part, and you want to build it back quickly, and with an energy regeneration rate rope, it's very easy. For these substats, you want to get effect hit rate until you have around 150%. You can get even higher than that, the higher the better, but definitely aim for about 150% so you can get the benefits from the base kit and all the stuff you do. Past that, you want to get speed until he is faster than your team. So getting speed with Von Walk pretty much just to make sure you go first. So on an Acheron team, you want to make sure he's the first one going so you can set up. Same on any other team, so just make sure you get enough speed to where he can outspeed. And then past that is just attack percent for more damage. Since for the most part you can't really get anything else, some survivability like HP defense can be used on him just so he doesn't die. But effect hit rate till you do have around 150% or higher, then enough speed to outspeed your team, and then just attack percent or whatever you want. And as for sort of the team building or team idea section of this video, so obviously one shot taken by Jiaoqiu. So the best character he works with is Acheron, so if you have Acheron, it's going to be her best partner. If you have Acheron at E0, something like Acheron, Jiaoqiu, and someone like Pela, and then you sustain preferably someone like Aventurine, this is going to be your best E0 team. You could change Pela with someone like Black Swan, you could change her with someone like Welt, just depending on what you have. And if you do have Acheron at E2, you could just slot in a Harmony Support, so you can take Sparkle. If you're good at managing, you could just take someone like Bronya, wherever she is. I can't find her, there she is. Team full, but you get the point. And even at E0, if you do have Sparkle, you could run this team practically for the E0. The sustain, you could swap it out for someone like Fushwan or Gallagher. There are options you can do. And outside of Acheron, it is important to note that Jiaoqiu right now is morally suboptimal. He is not completely optimal for any other team. But to note some teams you can do, it's going to be good for Dr. Ratio because Dr. Ratio needs debuffs in order to do damage. He wants to have debuffs on the enemies always, and Jiaoqiu is really good at applying debuffs. So he's going to be a great option, so you could run something like a premium team of Dr. Ratio, Jiaoqiu, and then you could take something like Robin and a sustain. If you don't want to use Dr. Ratio, you could also use Yunli because he does make enemies take increased ultimate damage, and Yunli mainly does damage off ultimate damage. So Yunli is another good option you can actually use, so you take something like that. Again, Robin, because you know, where isn't Robin good? Even not Robin, you could take someone else. Just breaking with what you have, like a team like this, you could still use Sparkle or Ting Yun, and then your sustain sustain would be whatever you can use. You could even take him with someone like Argenti because his main source of damage is from his ultimate, so you'd run a team around him, so you take someone like Tingyun as well with Xiaoqiu and Argenti, and then you're sustained. And that is for the most part what you could do, but once again, he is mainly best on a Acheron team. That is where he's going to shine very well, and he is the absolute best you could take. But in the future, he might become even better. So as of this video, this is going to be his best team, a Acheron team. Again, you could swap out Sparkle for another Nihility if you're E0, or if you just don't have her, or just a different Harmony support. And yeah, that is the full Xiaoqiu guide. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Let me know if you did. That's all I gotta say. Peace out.